Hello and welcome in Night City. Today we have a very special episode that many of you actually asked for. But before we dive into the details and what we prepared for you today, I'm Amelia, I will be your host for today. And with me, I have a new co-host that you didn't meet yet. So please give a warm welcome to Laura Beitzel, our senior community manager. And the one and only maximum Mike Pondsmith, the creator of Cyberpunk.
Actually, I'm one of 3 different Mikes, and we actually trade off occasionally so that the assassins can't find me.
Okay.
That's a good strategy.
Yeah, it's a good strategy. It works. So yeah, today we're live with you. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. But sadly, we don't have any news or announcements today. It's just about Cyberpunk to celebrate. We are almost at the 5th anniversary of 2077, so keep the chat civil, okay, guys? Let's have this deal, and maybe we'll figure something out for you later on. I hope that's fine with everyone.
It's fine for me.
Fine by me. In fact, I'm actually fascinated by the fact it's been 5 years. Seems like it happened like yesterday.
Yeah.
Well, it's been 5 fun years.
And we still have some time to go for the future, so we're not stopping.
We got work to do.
And I think that actually is a really great segue for me to, I guess, kick us off with a question that I would love to ask you, Mike, and that is, obviously, it's been a journey since the late 80s with the beginnings of Cyberpunk 2013 and the reiteration of it with 2020. And I would just love to know what inspired you to create this world.
Well, when I started, it wasn't exactly a world. It was more of, I'm going to make a game. And my original thought was I was going to make a game that was effectively my favorite movie, Blade Runner. But then at some point I realized I couldn't do the rules for replicants and make them work. So part of it was that feeling. I'm a big fan of film noir. And I wanted to get some of that sort of tragic and cool thing. But I'm also a big fiend for technology, as anybody at Talsorian can tell you. If it's a new weird thing, I probably bought it and brought it into the office. So I took a couple things I really loved, threw them together, and started to put together the rough concepts of it. And then eventually, it didn't gel until one night I was headed back across the Bay Bridge in San Francisco, and I'm looking out at basically the San Francisco area and the billions of lights and all that, and I said, the city is coming out at night. Night City, okay. But the idea was, at that point for me, a fun thing to do would be to get in the car and just drive all over. I had 40 miles of territory and freeway I could just go roaring around on. And when you go to a city at night, it's a different place. I love the neon. San Francisco, it's a lot of rain-slick streets and things like that. And there's always interesting things happening in the background. People will be doing things on the corners. People will also have their apartments lights on, and you can sort of see the dialogue. Even if you can't hear it, you can kind of see how people do things. So it's like watching a movie. And when the movie happens in a future that's a little film noir and a lot technology, which was the core of the 80s then, all that new tech, you end up with what we got. But it didn't all happen that way. It took time, and it evolved.
That's very cool.
So we actually have some questions in the chat already.
Okay.
So let's start with the first one from Riley.
Hey, Riley.
What part of Cyberpunk world horrifies you the most?
That we're actually creating it, but that's another story. And yes, my son always teases me about that because a lot of the things we wrote about are happening or have happened. And as he says, Dad, think happy thoughts, for God's sake, okay? So I'm working on that.
Okay.
What I find is that we are moving towards a sort of a dehumanization on one side, and a lot of forces that would like to have it be that way. And yet we ignore the fact that people do make community and they do make ways to unite. But they don't know that. They don't know that there's somebody on the other side aiming for the same thing they are. So what I find in the cyberpunk future is that we lose all that and we buy in on the idea that it can't be changed. You know, they talk about cyberpunk being a dystopia, but it's a dystopia with a kind of interesting version of hope.
Yeah.
It's a dystopia where if you're willing to get out there and do what you got to do, it could work out. But you're not going to save the world. It's not really designed in that way. What you're going to do is you're going to save the people and the things you care about. You know, you may not change all of climate change, but you can rewild an area. You know, you pick your targets and you fight for them.
Yeah, it's like in that one of the very first video that we as CDPR did with you, where you said that cyberpunk is not about saving humanity, it's about serving yourself.
Yep.
Do you think it's still like
Oh, yeah.
valid point?
Oh no, that point is very much there. You can win those battles against mega corporations or, you know, corp governments or whatever, but you're not going to do it by throwing yourself up against the wall. You're going to be more subtle about it. You're going to make alliances. You're going to choose what you can save.
Yeah.
And the thing about saving the world is that's a job for superheroes. That's a job for people who have powers beyond any comprehension. At best, in the cyberpunk world, you are a low-yield superhero who has certain abilities, but those abilities are the extension of the technology you're using. So you're not going to pull off a Superman. You're not going to go step into a phone booth, if you could find a phone booth, and, you know, be changed from Clark Kent into Superman. It's not going to happen. But you can drive the local booster gang out of your neighborhood, or you guys can ally and find ways to get things that your neighborhood and the people around you need, and be willing to go to the mats to fight for them. So yeah, it's not about saving the world. Superheroes save the world. You're cyberpunks. You don't save the world. You save your people.
Hell yeah. I'm going to throw to a question that we have in chat from somebody called Sensign. And they say, I have a question. How does it feel to see something you've created so many years ago now being a video game and received the way it has around the world?
Actually, it's really weird. Here's the thing. When you write something like this, you're writing it in a vacuum and you're throwing it over your shoulder, hoping someone's actually reading it. And you know, you hope you do well in it. And originally when Cyberpunk came out, when we got to 2020, it was very strange because we had a lot of different competing tabletop companies who were rushing to do the same thing. And I likened it then to being a surfer and you're on a wave and you're starting to paddle up and you look behind you and all the best surfers in the world are lining up right behind you on the wave and you're going, I need to get faster than these guys. That was what it was like when we first did 2013 and then went to 2020. And by 2020, we were up on the wave, we were moving fast, and it looked like we were right. And that's about as good as I thought it would ever get. You know, occasionally people would say, hey, didn't you write that, you know? And I go, yeah, sorry your character died. But, you know, it boiled down to you don't take it seriously. But here's the thing. Over time, particularly the fact that we sent this out into the world, and one edition ended up going to Poland, and a couple of guys over in Poland said, gee, you know, we'd really like to do this as a video game. That metastasized it. And if you looked around you now, there's clothing, there's music, there's art, there's jewelry, there's, and action figures. I always wanted to have action figures. I never thought it would happen. But all of that is because all of these people are now finding something they need or can use out of that world, and they build on it. So you're building this really massive shared thing. I occasionally say I didn't create it all, and it's true, I didn't. But I gave a lot of people a point where they could all join in and go, hey, let's get in a party. And they got in a party. For me, it's weird when people, show up and go, oh, you're Mike. I go, yeah, I'm Mike. I write video games. That's kind of what I do. And, no big fuss here, okay? I have some really funny stories of people who, like, out of left field recognized me, and I went, what? When my wife was buying a new car, she was buying her Tesla, as a matter of fact, and I remember she was signing all the paperwork over in the offices, and the guy who was selling us the car said, so what can you tell me about 2077 when it comes out? I'm looking over like, what? I'm thinking, I was wearing a sign or something, But yeah, actually I'd forgotten I was wearing a Cyberpunk t-shirt, and he had figured it out. And I went, okay, well, it's going to be like this, as much as I can tell you. But this really is about me. I just wrote the damn thing. You guys have grabbed it and run off with it. And I get to watch what you do with it.
So while you were watching us, do this game, was there any element that you saw and thought like, hey, this is exactly how I imagined that, or these guys got it completely wrong?
I never got to they got it completely wrong.
Okay.
And part of it was, yeah. No, part of that was that I was involved in that process all the way. If it had been a situation where I just threw the license out and you guys went away, I don't think we'd gotten what we got. But luckily, I had worked in video games. In fact, I was still working in video games when years ago, Michał Nowakovsky sent us a letter saying, hey, I want to do a Cyberpunk game. So I had a pretty good idea of how you had to do it. I'd also worked at that point on Matrix Online, and I had a pretty good idea of what things you wanted or could do and get away with in a dystopian game. So yeah, because I was involved in it, what it meant was I could get my input into it, and we could adapt and get it closer to what we wanted. And occasionally you get these weird things. I think the first one I ever saw was I was in the offices at CD Projekt, and somebody said, hey, Mike, I want to show you what the guns look like. It's really cool. And he had a whole bunch of pictures of these silver blaster-like things. And I said, no, you don't get this. Cyberpunk games, Cyberpunk guns, rather, are big, nasty, black, scary things, which occasionally have little lights on them that watch you like eyes, but they are not science fiction. They are brutal things from where we are that have been basically kicked up 2 or 3 notches. And that was interesting because after I had that conversation, Adam Badowski, who was studio manager then, got everybody together in a big room, like about 100 of us. And they said, Mike, explain what this is like. And I went and explained it. And at the end of it, I realized I'd opened my mouth too much, because then Adam said, can you go to the Krakow studio and explain? And I went, all right.
Let's go.
But
the
important part was everybody listened. So when it finally started showing up, it wasn't that big a surprise. It was, yeah, this is about what I had in my head, because we had been talking about it the whole time. And it wasn't like I'd sent it out and hoped that we'd get something. Yeah. People had asked me the entire time, what do you think? In fact, that still goes on now. A good portion of the trip I've just taken out here to CD Projekt, people have been showing me what they're doing. They're showing me what's going to be happening in the new iteration of the game. They're showing me what's happening with some of the TV or radio or whatever stuff. And they ask me all the time. So it means that we stay in the same space and we see the same outcomes.
Yeah, that's really cool. I have another question from chat that I really like and I think comes into this really well. So somebody called Dur260 has said that they have a question of how did you come up with such a detailed world history for the Cyberpunk universe?
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Remember I said about my son saying, think happy thoughts, Dad? We do our homework. We do a lot of homework at TAL. We have tons and tons of books we read. We read history, we read sociology, we read current technologies and so forth like that, so that we have a pretty good idea of what the trends are headed towards. And that makes it easier to actually guess where the future is going to be, or at least a future that's believable. At a certain point, if you're looking at all the technologies and you're looking at current history and so forth, you're going to recognize that there are not a lot of paths that can happen. It can only go a certain way. And occasionally you get weird things. For example, we came up with several weird wars. We came up with a plague that then I looked up the next day and went, oh, COVID. Okay, I should keep my mouth shut.
You're predicting things.
Yeah, well, in the tabletop industry, I get teased a lot for doing just that. And I kind of go, well, yeah, I could be predicting, but to be honest, like I said, it's all laid out. You just have to find it and look at it and assemble it. And in a lot of ways, it assembles like a model kit. You go, okay, a dark future will have cars or vehicles. Okay, what are the vehicles I see? What kind of vehicles could we get out of that? You're going to have food that is going to be more processed because there's so many people. What's that food going to look like? How will it be sold? I remember our art director had a lovely time. She got together with Jay Gray, who's one of our leads, and they just created corporations that did food. And then they roped in one of our other designers, and James Hutt basically looked at it and said, well, yeah, but they've got to have these things. And as it turned out, his mother had actually worked for a very, very large food combine, so he could go draw on that. And next thing we knew, we had a food company that made kibble. But that wasn't me just coming up with a weird idea. It was assembled from all the things we saw around us. And that's how we get this stuff. We don't just all dream it up. We do the homework. And we do a lot of homework. If you were in my office, you would see, 5 bookshelves of just, everything, World War II, animals, space, history, you name it, it's on the walls around my office.
That's really cool. I guess on doing your homework and inspiration beyond the world building itself and things like the guns and the vehicles, the cyberware itself, where are you drawing your inspiration from and then thinking about a piece of cyberware yourself that you would like to have installed? What do you think it would be? Actually,
I have had some of the cyberware installed already, believe it or not, but that's another story. When I first started looking at doing the cyberware, one of our writers, Colin Fisk, his dad was a neurosurgeon. And so I went to him and said, what can we do? How can we get away with these things? And he gave me a lot of ideas about what was feasible. Of course, this is in the 80s, but it gave me a solid grounding on what you could do with the technology involved. What I didn't see at the time were things like 3D printing. 3D printing, like I love it, for example, now that a kid can be born with an arm missing, and you can 3D print an arm that works. And that can be upscaled for as that kid gets older and needs another arm. And it doesn't cost $1 million. That's astounding. That is technology that's gone to the street and is giving people what they need. So one of the fascinating things we do is when we look at technology, we kind of go, where are we right here? And you were asking about what kind of technology I would want. I kind of had it done to me. In my family, cataracts run. And eventually my doctor said, you're getting cataracts. Before they get in there, you should get your eyes worked on. Okay, so there I'm going, yeah, all right, this is going to be interesting. And I go in and my doctor, she's pretty amused by the whole thing, and she says, okay, so we're going to do one eye 1 week, we'll do the other eye the next week. And I said, okay, this is going to be really painful. She said, no, not at all. I'm like, all right, you're going to cut into my eyeball and you're going to put in lenses. And she said, yeah, what kind of vision do you want? And I went, what do you mean? She said, you were really farsighted before. Do you still want to be super farsighted? Do you want something moderate or close up? And I said, well, okay, I'll take moderate. I got to read more. I have to look at a screen when I work. And she goes, okay, great.
Let's do it.
So I go in the next week and sits me down in a chair, kind of like a dentist chair, and she says, here, put your chin on this plate. That's comfortable. And they hook me up to an IV, and she says, oh, okay, this will just help you relax. And it's kind of sleep, but you can't really sleep because you have to have your eyes open. Oh, okay. And literally what happens is, as I perceive it, 10 minutes later, she says, okay, you're set. Open your eyes again. And I went, what? And what they had used was a drug. I'd love to find out where you get it. This drug that basically wipes out your short-term memory about every 3 seconds. So they're going in, and I forgot about it already. And they go slip, I forgot about it already. And I looked at that and I said at the end of it, I said, so you're my Ripper doc, aren't you? And she laughed at it, and because we had talked about what I do and what we write. And I went back in the next week, and there had been no pain. I had to put some eye drops in, and I wore an eye patch for like a day, and then I took it off, and everything was like insanely bright. Basically, it was like somebody had put a cyber eye in.
Yeah.
And I went, whoa, okay. So I went in the next week, and they did the same thing, and I didn't remember any of it again. And then both eyes were really good. And again, I want to point out this was being done by a machine that my doctor used to implant lenses of my choice into my eyes. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I got cyber eyes. And, with a little work, they could probably do more than that. I've seen designs now that have photographic capabilities in them for that sort of technology. I've seen versions, for example, I have a friend who had her eyes done, and she changed her eye color. I always want to have green eyes. You got green eyes now, So that would be what I would have. And actually, the funny thing about it is that I told my doctor, yes, you're my Ripper doc. And as it happened, you guys at CD had given me a really big, bright neon sign for Korzycka Optics, which was too bright for my office. When I turned it on, it would blind people from a mile away. But I gave it to her, and I said, since you're Ripper doc, you get to have a Korzycka Optics sign in your office. So if somebody comes in, they recognize it. And she thought that was pretty funny. So yeah, I have a Ripper doc.
Do you have your fixer?
I do, but I tend to be the person who does a lot of the fixing. My main fixer right now is Rob, and Rob is actually your equivalent at Telsorian. He basically, in fact, works with you, Amelia.
Can confirm.
And they figure out, between the two of you, where I need to be and what deals need to be put down and so forth. And then I go back to my wife, who's our business manager, and I go, make us a lot of money doing this. And that's what she does.
So if you would design Cyberpunk today, and knowing what you know so far, and obviously, with everything that happened between 80s and now, would you change something in the cyberpunk universe?
That's a tough problem when you're working in near future history.
Yeah.
Because you're constantly doing a foot race to get out ahead of what is actually there. You know, I tell a story sort of like that. So this phone, we all have these right now, right? And we have apps that get downloaded to them. Way the hell back in, I think it was 89, 90, I came up with this idea called the agent. Mm-hmm. And the agent was essentially, at that point, a cell phone. And you have to remember, cell phones back then were little tiny things. They were getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And somebody came up with a large cell phone like this. And everybody said, yeah, that'll never sell. But what they had done is they had designed it to take programs and download them into this. And thus, this was no longer a phone, it was a tiny computer. Yeah. And it was a tiny computer that could take pictures, it could talk to things, it could control things. It was a computer. It just looked like a phone. So the insane thing about that, is that it used a concept that didn't exist yet. And in fact, my son once said this to me. He said, you realize, Dad, you invented the cell phone. And I went, really? And he said, yeah, it's basically a big phone that takes apps, or what you called micro-programs, and it, does stuff for you. How come I'm not rich? Didn't
we
work
should make
that
some
way.
calls.
Yeah, actually, my business manager is obviously falling down. I need time to fix it. But seriously, that's the race you run, is getting out ahead of the technology. But, I'd already come up with essentially what cell phones do. And at a certain point, all you can do is say, well, they happen in your head now, and you have, Lucy making phone calls out of her head. Well, we're probably there now. So
someone is probably doing that already.
I'm sure. Actually, at this point, if I were to go down the hall and talk to, let's say, James, who tracks this sort of thing these days for us, he would tell me who was doing it, and I'd be set up. Get to work, James. But seriously, I wouldn't change a whole lot because of two things. One, the technology has worked on a similar curve to what we saw, which is it becomes cheap, it becomes usable. Other people find ways to use it that are not ways that are authorized. Mm-hmm. When I was, starting this out, a computer was still kind of a, new idea. Now they're ubiquitous, as was, the idea of AI. Yeah. All that stuff's here. We just had to get out ahead of it. Yeah. And I wouldn't change any of that. And as for the sociological things, we're kind of still doing it. We're still aiming in the same way. You can't really say, there are no mega corporations. Yeah. They're all out there, Yeah. And many of them are more powerful than governments. So, it boils down to there wasn't a lot to change because it was on the right path to begin with.
Absolutely. We actually have some questions from the chat, so maybe let's jump to some of them. The one I actually really like and would love to know from the Electric Soda. The slang in your word feels incredibly organic. Could you talk about your process for creating it and keeping it from sounding forced?
Oh, geez. Yeah, some of it boiled down to, first of all, I avoided the living daylights out of elite speak because I knew that was going to get dated sooner or later. Yeah. A lot of it develops out of what the slang is supposed to be describing, input, output, that sort of thing. A lot of it has evolved over time, and a lot of the things that he probably or they probably know are things that came up in the video game. And to be honest, a lot of the video game slang I didn't design, but it was organic to conversations that people had, things people needed. It basically was going to be an extension of that organic creation because people make language. You know, language does not come out of a box.
Yeah.
Language is an ongoing process in which we code ourselves to communicate to each other. So it gets to be organic, and if you try really hard to make slang, you're going to get it forced. So, you know, it may sound goofy, but people still say cool because it worked.
Oh, yeah.
And it's cool. Did I
People
just say
still
that?
say choom.
They say choom. Choom was really fascinating because, I thought that was going to be one of the more forced ones, okay? I was trying to find something that got across the idea of multicultural, God help us. In this case, I was looking for sort of an African sort of sounding, but it was unilateral because, there are just tons of languages in Africa. And then I'm hanging out with a friend of mine, and she's describing the group she hangs with. She says, I'm going to get together with my chooms, and we're going to do this. And I went, you're what? And I went, let me get this straight. So you now use choom and chumbada as language right now. You have that as part of your language structure.
Yeah.
Well, obviously it meant something, and it worked. And I noticed later on that other people were trying to create things like it. But its main idea was that it was somebody that was not just a chum, because it had some connections to chummer and, many other terms. In fact, Britishisms in some cases, and Australian. Yes. Australian is a great place to get great slang.
We have plenty of it.
Yeah, I borrow it all the time, no worries. Okay, but seriously, there obviously was a need for that. People needed to be able to say, you are my friend, you're important, and this is a group. When we're all chooms together, this means this group of people are all important too.
Yeah.
So I have to say that slang basically in Cyberpunk is as much an evolution as almost anything else we do. Mm-hmm. I worked really hard not to kind of come up with dumb terms because I realized that would be embarrassing, and I did not want to be remembered as this guy who came up with this cringe term. In fact, cringe will be gone in a few years too.
Absolutely fair.
Yeah.
So going off of language and in a different form of language that we all sort of come to know through music, and in talking to you, I've discovered you actually used to be a radio host, a DJ, which is pretty cool.
I not DJ, but I play jazz.
So cool. So I wanted to ask, you are a radio host and DJ in Night City for 107.3 Mora Rock, and what's that feel like going from actually having done the job in real life and then also doing it in game?
It's a lot easier in that particular situation because I don't have to figure out how to, plug in radio carts and have a playlist that I have to hit. Mm-hmm. When you actually are a DJ, there's a lot of sub jobs you end up doing. Okay, I'm gonna run cart number 3, and there's the commercial. And it's now gone to computerized systems that make it easier. There's actually a funny story. Was originally I wasn't going to be doing that gig. The guy in charge, Boris, who's in charge of sound and so forth like that, had actually gotten me to play Dex, the fixer who...
More drop for everyone.
Yeah, okay. And I actually recorded Dex. I went down to Los Angeles and we recorded the whole thing. And so Boris came back to me about 2 weeks later and he said, well, I got another idea because I really liked your voice. And if you play Dex, you die too soon. And I said, well, I don't die. And he's going, well, no, you won't be able to do this. But I've got another idea if you want to do this, which is you would play a DJ. How would that sound? I said, it would sound like how I spent half my college career being a DJ. So I ended up doing more rocky. So, you're going to end up being a DJ who traffics conspiracy theories and, secret information and all that. And I said, Okay, I'm good with that, because what I realized was I could then sneak in things that players outside could dig around and try to find out what the truth was.
Yeah.
And that was fun.
It's pretty cool.
So that's how I ended up being a DJ. It was sort of an extension of what I already did, and Boris basically wanting me to, not die in the first half of the game.
Thank you, Boris.
Mm-hmm.
I guess while we're also still on 77, some people in chat have been asking questions about your V. So who was your V in the start and then by the end?
Actually, it's interesting. I saw a guy today in a hotel who looked like how I would do it. My V was male, black, because at that point, you didn't see that many brothers out there, and had sort of the short dreads, and wore kind of leathers and that sort of thing because he was a nomad. And he carried a big honking rifle, automatic rifle over his shoulder, and guns packed everywhere. And when I first went into town as that character, because I actually got to play it before the game came out, and in fact, I think you actually ran me through it, if I recall right.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think so. It's your fault. So I basically, when I got into town, I got a cool car and drove around doing nomad-like things. I tried for a while to do a V that was a corporate, and that didn't work. And I didn't want to do a V who was a street kid, because it was actually kind of like a nomad who didn't drive. And if I was going to be in Night City, I was going to drive.
Yeah.
In fact, that's what I tend to do. We have at Talsorian a huge screen, wraparound screen with a really terrifyingly overpowered computer with more processing power than God. And half the time I'll go down there and just go, okay, well, I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to drive all over Night City at night. And I'll drive around and I'll do what I call racing the sunrise, where you try to get all around the city and then all the way out to, the Badlands.
Yeah.
And then, see the sunrise. Which, by the way, is great that we have a day-night cycle in weather. I love that. So, basically, that's the role I played. I had to alter it a little bit because in the first revs, and this is back before we'd done release, in fact, my character got into his car and I popped up in the T pose with no pants. You saw that, remember? You didn't say anything. You were good. But basically, I said, okay, we're fixing it, right? And we're going to fix it.
We're gonna fix it.
But I liked the character. And there was another reason why I went with that particular character, and that was that female V reminded me a great deal of my daughter. In fact, to a point where when we were watching some of the openings, her brother, Cody, he and I looked over and we said, yeah, stolen. So, and at that point, I think she did have the half cut as well. That was kind of the fad with her friends. So, I said, that's really weird. I don't want to play Dolan. That's, that's kind of strange.
Fair.
So I stuck with the guy I had, and I haven't played him in a while, but I should probably send you over some pictures of him leaning on his favorite car now, which is a red Mai.
I'm very happy to post that on our socials.
I'll be happy to do that.
Let's do it.
My Nomad now drives a Mai, and this is because during one of the missions, it happens at a beach house. And I discovered
Let's go to beach house, please.
They're going to tell you about this later because they were both in a game where they went to that beach house, but you didn't do exactly what I did, which was to discover I could drive up onto the porch of the beach house in a Mai and drive around leaning out of the car shooting people. And I said, this is great. And then I discovered that in town, you could drive up the stairs and the cops couldn't follow you.
My superiority.
It may look stupid, but
it works.
It really works.
It's all about it works.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
I actually, unfortunately, they only let you keep one car because otherwise I wanted to have like a stable of mice with different paint jobs.
Speaking about, you seeing the game before the release and whatnot, how does it feel to see two Hollywood celebrities, so Keanu Reeves and Idris Elba, in a game? Because I remember our meeting with Johnny Silverhand for the first time.
You remember that whole thing. Yes. Okay, for those of you who aren't in on the joke, so Amelia did not want to tell me who was going to play Johnny. And all she would tell me was it was somebody who was in a band, and they had dark hair, and they were an actor. Okay, and I said, okay, Johnny could have dark hair. You've got a lot of time between, when he was blonde Johnny until now. And, how many times can a rock star change his hair, right? So we're sitting there that night, my wife and I, our business manager, and we're sitting around, we're kind of talking and stuff like that. And she says, yeah, I think it's Keanu Reeves. And I went, what? She says, well, he plays guitar, he's got dark hair. I'm going, that could cover anybody. I mean, there's a lot of people out there, So we get in the next day, and Amelia's been just waiting for this. See, she's blushing now. It's great. But she's been waiting, and she's going, have you figured out who it is yet? And I'm going, I got no idea, And behind us, sitting there, is Lisa, and she says, Keanu Reeves, isn't it? And Amelia's kind of like,
this poker face I've ever.
She's like, what? And I'm going, she does that. Because Lisa's very good at jumping to logical conclusions that I would never see. And yes, it was Keanu Reeves. So, my first thought was, she showed us, the mocaps and things like that. And I said, this is really weird. The nicest guy on earth, Keanu Reeves, is playing an incredible jerk. If Dolan brought Keanu Reeves home, or rather Johnny Silverhand home, and said, this is my new boyfriend, I like to say, I don't know whether I'd shoot her first or him first or both of them just to save the disaster. But he was good in it, and he likes it. And I didn't think he'd ever play a Cyberpunk character again. But I think he got the right Cyberpunk character. And his Johnny has really grown on me. I like the way he plays Johnny. Because instead of just being a jerk, Johnny has all of these elements underneath him that say that he really could be a better person. And as I've said in interviews before, part of Johnny Silverhand's problem is he is an incredibly broken person. And he's never, since he was 4, he's never had a life. And in fact, Alt is as important as she is because that's the only person Johnny has ever felt safe about loving. So, they're kind of a big thing, unfortunately, a big thing that ends up passed out over there. So I was amazed at that, okay. But I liked it, I thought it worked. So several years later, and some of the CD team come out and they've brought Edge Runners. And we decide at Talsorian, we're in the conference room, we decide we're gonna binge watch Edge Runners. And I mean, the whole thing. So I don't know how many hours we were there, but we had food brought in. And I had seen the script, so I kind of knew how it ended. And so I was not sobbing my eyes out. But yeah, a lot of the guys at Tal were kind of like, oh God, that's and I felt like, this is just horrible. And later when I saw people who were writing about this just broke my heart, I went, whoa, what have we done, Romeo and Juliet for the 21st century? Wow. But at the end of it, to, kind of get us out of this utter depression we were in, they said, oh, we want to see the trailer for the new one, Phantom Liberty. And I said, oh yeah, let's check that out. Okay, so Phantom Liberty starts running, and there's Reed sitting on the end cart, and the end cart is just how I imagined it. It's And he's sitting there, you know, and he's talking and all that. And then the guys come in and he's, you know, we see it go down, right? And I'm going, yeah, that was really good. But, you know, guys, are we going to get in trouble? Because that guy looks a lot like Idris Elba. He's probably going to sit, you know, going, it is Idris. What? You know, okay, so let me get this straight. You got Keanu Reeves, and then you turn around and get Idris Elba. You know, I mean, what's next? Scarlett Johansson? Don't say it. I don't want to know.
I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying anything.
Scarlett, you know, I have roles for you. You could do in this. But seriously, two things hit me. One, they worked really well for the characters. Two, they were people actors who wanted to play those characters, and so they immersed themselves in it, and they did a great job.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to be there doing it. In fact, you know, not that long ago, I saw that Keanu would like to find a way to come back from the dead and play Johnny again. I have ways to do that, Keanu. Contact me.
On that note, and I think this would just be a fun little piece of information for everybody to know about you. If Night City were real, what district would you want to live in?
That's tough. I'm trying to remember the district that I think it was based out of one of the apartments you could get in a later game. The two-story one that essentially becomes the place where David and God, just went blank on her name.
David and
David, come on.
Lucy's apartment?
God, I can't think of her name now.
Because I think is it the Glen? Maybe?
Yeah,
the
it's
Glen
Glen.
apartment?
It's Glen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's
Glen
Glen,
apartment.
right.
That is my
Anyway,
favorite apartment.
yeah, so, you know, I love that apartment, the two-story levels and all that. So, yeah, I liked that apartment. I would own it myself. I would get one of the cats around, you know, and hang out, and probably the iguana, you know. Lucy, that was it.
Yep.
Yeah, David and Lucy. Breaks my heart. But at any rate, yeah, I would move out all their stuff, and I would take that apartment. It had a great view, and it was a really kind of nice place, you know, and there are versions of it where you can get yourself an electric guitar sitting over in a corner so I could play the guitar, you know, for my lizard.
Yeah,
you know.
have a little rockabye moment for yourself.
Yeah. So, yeah, I was in bands when I was, you know, back in college.
Is there anything you don't do?
Not that I'm going to confess, but yeah, you live long enough, you do a lot of weird things. You know, I'll have to tell you about the time when I had a scorpion as a pet, but that's another story.
I can't wait to hear this.
Next time.
You know,
Next time.
yeah, next time.
Do you have your favorite character in Cyberpunk universe? So it doesn't have to be from 2077, can be from 2020 or Red. I know our community was betting on one, so kind of want to
Oddly
see if
enough,
that was the same.
over the years, it would be Morgan. Morgan
right.
is not, oddly enough, he's not one of my characters. Ripper Jack, rather, is one of my characters I played. But in order to build Morgan and make him work, I had to know him very well. And one of the things I love about Morgan that most people miss is that he is utterly normal. He's a guy who, you know, served his time in the military, came back, you know, ended up in a situation where, you know, he had to go take some people down, and Militech said, "You want a job?" And it continued. So he's a guy who kind of goes into what he does as, yeah, I kill people for a living, but I live in a world where people kill each other for no reason.
Yeah.
So at least I'm getting paid. And other than that, Morgan is really kind of normal in a world that's utterly bizarre. And it's interesting because I really like that character. I understand Johnny, but he's too broken for me to actually try to inhabit in my head. You know, I like to say Johnny Silverhand's been living in my brain now for 35 years. And
You feel like V.
Yeah, I do. I feel like V, but V got to an accommodation with Johnny, you know. I just kind of go, Johnny, go back, you know. Get back in the room, you know, come out.
Backseat, bro.
Yeah, backseat, bro. That's it, man. So, yeah, basically, I would say Morgan, which is probably who you guys guessed.
Yep.
Yeah, our
Yeah.
coach was betting on Morgan, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not because Morgan is such a total badass, although he is, but the fact that he is a badass who is totally normal. You know, if you met Morgan Blackhand on mass transit somewhere, you wouldn't think too much about it. You'd go, yeah, that guy looks like he's probably a salesman of some sort. And, you know, he's pretty good looking, but, you know, he's not insanely good looking, you know. My model for Morgan has always been George Clooney in, like, his mid-range period, where, you know, George Clooney looks like a normal person.
Yeah.
A really good-looking normal person, but
Businessman.
a businessman. And if you think about it, that's the whole point. Morgan needs to be able to infiltrate all kinds of places where people would expect a badass to be there, and they don't notice the guy who looks like he came in to sell them something. You know, yeah, I'm here to fix your computers. You know, I'm here to check the lights. You know, Morgan is normal, and that's what I like about him. He's normal.
Okay.
Pretty cool.
I just broke the heart of a whole lot of people out there.
Probably.
Well, while we are
But
talking
maybe we'll
about...
get George Clooney.
Hey, look.
We can always hope.
While we're, I guess, discussing tabletop in general, what's been your biggest creative lesson in all these years of world building now?
One, there are a lot of ideas that are really stupid ideas that should never be put to paper. Two, you may have a great idea, but your audience may not be able to follow it or be interested in it. For example, Cyberpunk V3, as we call it, I wanted to experiment with doing something a bit more on transhumanism. And so V3 is about two things, transhumanism, and also how media, and social media particularly, allows you to pick the reality you want to live in. If you go talk to only certain people, if you are only seeing the feeds that you like, if you only, you know, dial in on the music, the art, the clothing, you can live in a different reality. And had I continued it, I think it would have been an interesting, you know, storyline to follow how that collapsed. But most of the audience could not follow it, okay? And it was, I think, you know, not really a good outcome. My brother Dave often says that, you know, if you took all the Cyberpunk links out of it, it would be really a great game. And, you know, he and I kicked around how we would do that. But the other thing I remember was I used the action figure art, and that was a mistake. Now, you got to take this in context. I collect G.I. Joes, you know, and at that time they were getting more and more realistic all the time. And you could, you know, sub them in for almost people. So I was thinking about this, and I said, you know, not that I can't afford to go get art done, but wouldn't it be kind of wild if we made everybody look more artificial than they really were? You know, we can do things that nowadays we would be using AI for. You know, we would be doing AI art for it. And if I did V3 over again, I would probably do AI art. But the whole point of those figures was we didn't have it, and I wanted the people in there to not look like they were real people. I wanted to say, yeah, you want dehumanized? This is dehumanized. And again, it didn't work. So, you know, here's the thing. You do something, it works or it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, you learn why it didn't work, and you accept that and you move on.
Speaking of AI, we actually had a question in chat from Miss Metaverse.
Okay.
Do you think AIs in cyberpunk world are misunderstood or dangerous by design?
Well, here's the thing. You have to look at which AIs you're talking about. For example, Soulkiller creates humans that live in an AI space, of which that means they have all the human foibles and so forth. I guess I may be really hopeful because the generative AIs that exist in Cyberpunk, they are different because their needs are different. And we're going to find out in the next 10 years whether I was right. But essentially, at some point, the AIs in Cyberpunk realized, well, anything that human beings really need, we could do with 1/10 of our brain power and go on and live our lives. And we could run the universe of humanity and, do that before the weekend came up. Yeah. And give them all what they wanted and then get on with our real business. So that was how I always saw generative AIs in Cyberpunk. I saw them as basically being at a level where they didn't really give a damn of, nobody was going to be in AI space going, I want to take control and I need a girlfriend. No, I mean, just, they didn't care.
Yeah.
And so that actually scared people more in the Cyberpunk world than anything else, was they didn't care. There was something they couldn't control. They didn't know how well those characters were going to run things if they got control. And if they got control, would it be a world that corporations and people who wanted power could really exist and work in? So that's one reason why AIs are mistrusted in the Cyberpunk universe, because they don't want what we want. And the AIs, quotation marks, that came out of Soulkiller, they at least know what we want. The other thing that makes AIs dangerous in the Cyberpunk world is Ra's Bartmoss. And Ra's is one of those guys that, he doesn't really like much of anybody. The closest human on Earth he is willing to tolerate is Spider Arabella Murphy. And we never quite figure out why he and Spider get along, because it ain't romantic. But I always think of Spider as like Ra's older sister who kind of knows and has the number on him. And he cut the rabbits loose. So all of a sudden there was a whole cadre of crazy, lunatic AIs that would rip your face off and dance on it. And they were loose in the net. Now, there are some reasons why he did this, and maybe we'll be able to talk a little bit more about that when we get to the next edition of the game. But having a bunch of lunatic AIs pop up that just want to kill you isn't going to help the reputation of AIs.
Absolutely.
So we have three, really. We have the rabbits, we have the generative, and we have the soul-killed. And Alt basically is stuck right in the middle, trying to make sure that we can get peace between all those factions. And it turns out that Ra's doesn't like Alt, but he's scared of her because he realizes she's actually smarter than he is, and probably a better coder.
She was badass.
She's a badass.
Oh, no. Alt is totally badass. Alt was, when I began writing Cyberpunk, the first thing I went was, okay, why does Alt work? Because I don't want to have, I'm the girlfriend that you have to rescue. I hated that idea. So I said, okay, you've got a tiger by the tail. You've got basically Alt is genius level and then some. And you kidnap her. And her first thought is, okay, I'm stuck here. How can I fuck you guys over? And that was about the size of it. And had Johnny not screwed up and unplugged her too early, she would have gotten back into her body and gone, Johnny, let's get out of here. I've just taken $1 billion out of Arasaka's accounts, and they'll never find us. But
well.
no, Johnny said,
Poor
oh, I have to save you, click. And he has beaten himself up about that ever since. Which, again, is another reason why Johnny is messed up.
Poor Johnny.
Yeah.
Can't catch a break.
Yeah.
Can't catch a break. Yep.
So we are coming up on time.
Oh, come on. You've got to have more questions
I
than
know.
that.
We've got
have
so many
lots of
questions.
You guys have to tell me to shut up.
We have so many questions. But I guess
We could do this online sometime, too. Yeah.
I think that would be great.
Yeah.
We should definitely
do
consider
that.
Rob would love to do it online.
Hell yeah.
Rob is our social media guy and Amelia equivalent.
Yeah, we'll talk. We'll talk with Rob.
So I guess I wanted to ask, do you have any final words that you want to share with everybody?
Well, what I'd say is whatever you take away from Cyberpunk and the Cyberpunk world, remember that there are a couple lessons. One, you should give a damn about the people around you and know who you give a damn about, because you'll have to make some tough decisions around those people. Two, technology is a tool. It is not something that is a be-all and end-all for itself. You use it. You know, I use this phone a lot, but I can also put it down, because in the end, there are things that phone cannot do that my mind can't do, okay? And third, I'm a guy who wrote a video game and a game, which means I don't have any superpowers or anything like that. So go out and do the same stuff I did and make your own legend. Hopefully it will not be at the afterlife, even though you might get a drink out of it. But enjoy your life, do your life, use your technology where you need it and wisely, and make sure you cover the bases for the people you care about. Do that, you're okay.
Yeah, that's lovely. That's
I
really
rehearsed
nice.
that.
Oh, well, I just want to say on behalf of us and the team and all of the community, thank you so much for
Hey,
being
thanks
with
for
us
having me.
today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
We really need to do it again.
Absolutely.
Talk to Rob,
and
let's
for
get
longer.
it set up.
Yeah. Rob,
know.
I'm gonna give you a call later on, so pick up.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that would be everything that we have time for tonight. But hopefully we'll be back soon with some more stuff from Night City. So, make sure to follow us on socials. Make sure to follow our folks from Earth Historians as well, because they do pretty amazing stuff as well.
Thank you.
And yeah, we'll see you with Laura next time on REDstreams.
In Night City.
See you in Night City.
Bye.
Bye.